Hello, welcome to the Beyond the Doctor's Lounge podcast with Dr. Sandy. And I am joined here with my personal coach, Dr. Jeannie Lawrence. She is just a wonderful physician coach, and I stumbled on her a couple of years ago, and she's been my life coach ever since and has helped me through some of the toughest times in my life. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Jeannie.
Thank you, Dr. Sandy, for having me. This is such a treat. I'm overjoyed to see the space that you're in now and the way that you are giving back to the women physician community. And so I'm honored to be here and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you definitely had a huge part in me having the courage to take the leap and get out there and put myself out there and hopefully pay some of that support forward to other women physicians. So that I don't delay things and use too much of your time, Jeannie, can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your path in medicine, whatever you want us to know about you?
Okay, so I'm Dr. Jeannie Lawrence. I am a board-certified psychiatrist. I'm hailing from Virginia currently. I started coaching about 4 years ago. I think it was in 2020 that I felt this nudge, right, within kind of my heart and spirit that when the world, if you remember, like this is the beginning of the COVID pandemic, everything was really chaotic, and this was our first time experiencing anything like that. Collectively, I felt really compelled to try to serve, try to help in some way, right? I'm not a frontline emergency room physician. I was working in a hospital as a psychiatrist at the time, but there was something inside that made me want to speak to the challenges that I was seeing. We were all isolated from each other, spending lots of time online. And so I was doing the same thing, and we were all kind of on social media, et cetera, sharing the struggles that people were having, right? The anxiety, the fear, the isolation, the unique challenges that physicians were facing, having to be on the front lines and go to work in the midst of a really scary pandemic before we even knew what was going on or had proper equipment. This was a very scary time. And I personally, before then, had been working on a blog. I'm an introvert. I had been doing some writing as a creative outlet, mostly around my own mental health and personal growth journey. But I was too nervous at the time to hit publish on the blog, and so nobody knew about it except for me and my husband. But when the pandemic started, that really gave me the push to put my work out into the world in hopes that somebody would see it, somebody would glean some hope and some insight around how they could thrive and be okay even in the midst of a really chaotic time that we were collectively experiencing. And so that's what I did. And I shared that blog online and in Facebook groups, and amongst family and friends were the first people to read it. But eventually it reached the viewership of some of my physician colleagues, and especially women physicians. And they were gracious enough to give me feedback, and a lot of what I was writing was really resonating. I was talking about the unique challenges that we face as women physicians who oftentimes are the strong ones in our family and friend circles, physicians, again, on the front lines or not on the front lines, it doesn't even matter. This place where there's a lot on our shoulders, and we're expected to kind of uphold our families, our communities, our patients, et cetera, without breaking a sweat. But what I knew from my own personal experience is that behind the scenes, we're all human beings, right? And we have our own struggles, and sometimes we don't know where to turn because there is such a high expectation from ourselves, from our conditioning, and from kind of the world at large that makes us feel like we have to have it all together all the time. That's what I was writing about. That's what folks were resonating with. And women physicians in particular started to ask me, I really relate to this, these struggles of kind of having a life that looks good on the outside, not always feeling so great on the inside, but what can we do about it? And that got me thinking about moving from just writing about it to creating solutions. And so that's how I started coaching. That's a little bit of my story. And I'll back up a little bit even further how I got even there, right? I started with the blog, but just to be clear, I used to be one of those women physicians, right, who I dealt with burnout, I dealt with personal struggles and challenges, and I found a lot of strength and growth in learning how to master my mind, my emotions, how to thrive and be resilient in the face of circumstances. I was able to turn my own life around, which is what made me want to start the blog in the first place, and why I was able to relate to others who were burned out and trying to find their way through. And then that's how we got from burnout basically to a blog, and now a business where I'm able to really serve and provide solutions.
That is so wonderful, Jeannie. And, to imagine that you started your outreach to women physicians at a time when you yourself, as well as the rest of the world, was going through so much stress. And, many of us feared for our lives, our well-being, our family. But in the middle of that, you were still able and still had the heart to reach out. So I really commend you for that. And I'm so, so glad you did, because I know you had such an impact, especially on me. And can you tell me, in general, since this is a career pivot channel, what challenges do you find that women physicians in particular may face in a medical career while facing burnout and when considering a career pivot?
Yeah. So part of my story, of course, is that, as I mentioned, I went from a burned out employed physician at one point to creating a business that I love, right? Being able to support women physicians in this way. That is a non-clinical career pivot that I was able to make. And then I've helped other women physicians do the same in their own ways, right? Like you, for example, with your non-clinical career pivot, right? And
yes.
into pharmaceuticals and research and lots of other areas as well. And so I say all of that to say there are some obstacles that I've noticed that women physicians face, like when they want to make a shift from their current clinical position into something non-clinical. One I see a lot is financial, right? A lot of times women physicians are breadwinners in their families, and even if they're not the primary breadwinner, the income that they earn as a physician matters a lot to their families. Whether it's children, whether they are paying for caregiving services for their parents, whatever the case may be. And so the idea of switching from a very stable income with a traditional career into something that is a bit unknown may result in some shift in their income, or, it's just really unknown, can be unnerving. And I've seen many women physicians stop right there, right? Like continue to experience burnout and continue to work in jobs that really chip away at their well-being for the sake of supporting their families. I think financial is a really big one. I think another is part of our conditioning as physicians, right? Coming into medicine, it's kind of, we're trained that it's like a calling. It's like a very high and noble service. It's like something that once you get into it, because it is so difficult to get into in the first place, that you're going to do it for the rest of your life, and that there really isn't anything else that you can do. I know a brilliant woman physician who thinks that being a physician is all she can do at this point. Feeling like they have no other skills or values to bring to the workplace or the workforce, feeling like others may look down on them or question their decision to leave, such a noble profession or such a stable career path, et cetera, for something, again, that's unknown. There's lots of conditioning and fear, I think, that holds people back from exploring what they would really love to do, but worried what other people will think, essentially, and worry about that. So that's another really big one. Those are the top two, I think, that come to mind.
Yes. I feel like the social aspect of the career pivot and being concerned about what friends, family, and colleagues may say or think, or the impact it may have on one's professional reputation is a big concern for a lot of physicians, and women physicians in particular, because there's so many struggles that women physicians can go through in establishing their careers. So it's not always so easy to pivot from that and take a chance on the unknown, which could turn out even better, but it is still unknown. Now, while you were talking, a question came to me. For a woman who has already decided that a career pivot, whether completely to non-clinical or in part, is appropriate for them, what are some of the consequences of maybe not eventually making that transition if they really have determined that that's what's right for them? I know we tend to be concerned about what may happen if we do pivot, but what are some of the things that can happen if we stay in a stressful job that we want to transition from?
That's a really good question. Yeah, there are consequences, and I'm glad that you brought that up. There's a cost to staying in jobs that, again, chip away at our well-being, cause frank burnout. One consequence is that burnout is a slippery slope to depression, right? It's a slippery slope, and I've seen women physicians who have transitioned to where it's more than just career burnout, right? It's starting to impact their mental health and other aspects of their life, and so I think that's a big one. Burnout, depression, any kind of prolonged suffering, emotional suffering that comes with a job that is just not sustainable, has a ripple effect, I think, in the lives of women physicians in terms of not only their own mental health, but also physical health, and then relationships as well, which are so important. I know it's part of my own experience with burnout years ago. Like, there was an impact in my personal life and my marriage and in my closest relationships, right? When you kind of give everything to your job and you have like nothing left to give to children, husband, family members, whatever the case may be. And that's not a sustainable dynamic. And so I think that is a cost, right, associated with staying as opposed to leaving a situation that isn't serving. Those are the ones that come top of mind. I think there are others too, but I think that's a really good pickup and point, that it's not just about staying for money or professional reputation or anything like that. There is a cost associated with that, and it can be severe.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's so important as women weigh the pros and cons of the transition, that they're not just thinking about what can happen if they leave, but I think it's also important that they consider what could happen if they stay once they have determined that that's the right thing for them to do. And how can a woman doctor, what are some tips you have for women doctors who are trying to find the boldness and the courage to go ahead and take those first steps once they've decided that the cost of staying is higher than the cost or the risk of leaving?
Yeah, I think tuning into channels like yours is a really great starting point. This is a really beautiful thing that you're offering, right? Because it gives women physicians an example of what's possible. What I think a lot of times why we stay stuck is because we can't really see that there is an alternative. There's an alternative, right? We can't really, we're not surrounded by women physicians who have successfully transitioned away from clinical medicine to a non-clinical career. Tuning into stations that provide insights and conversations and examples of what's possible, successful examples, is a really good step to kind of opening up your mind and opening up yourself to the possibility that, hey, maybe I could do this too. I think another thing that is necessary is to own what you desire. A lot of times we might have in the back of our minds that we might like to make a pivot, but we quickly shut that down with thoughts of how it's not going to work, how other people are going to judge us for it, etc. And then we don't really own our desire. And so we stay stuck, right, in a place that we don't really want to be. But when you're able to kind of take that idea that you'd like to make a pivot and say it aloud, right? Own it, like, this is something I really, really want. Yeah. Then things can start to align so that you can start to take action towards that. I think that a lot of the stuckness that people feel is inner, right? There's a lot of emotional and mindset that most of us need to do in order to break free of some of that conditioning that I talked about earlier, that we have as physicians, so that we can make a pivot. And you might be able to do that on your own, but I've noticed that a lot of times when we are the brain that we have lived in for the past several decades, right, sometimes needs an outside perspective. And so I've certainly heard my clients say that it's helped tremendously, right, to have a coach, right, or to have someone outside of your own brain show you the blind spots that you don't see, and then also show you the possibilities that you may not see, that are right in front of you. It also helps, of course, to talk to people who have made that pivot themselves for strategy, right? There are very practical things that I've heard you talk about, right, in terms of updating resumes and connections made with people who might be in industries that you're interested in. Taking small steps towards your goals and not, overwhelming yourself with huge stuff. There's lots that goes into it, but I think it really comes down to seeing what's possible, owning what you desire, getting some outside perspective to help you see your blind spots and the possibilities that you can't see, and of course, engaging the right strategy too.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to have coaching and community, and like you said, Jeannie, just someone outside of your own head, outside of your own circle, and removed from the situation to help you to see what you're not seeing. I know for me, I was so drowning when I started coaching with you that there's no way I could step out of my situation and really reflect and make those steps forward. It was a while before I could do that. And I definitely needed the support of a coach and professional like you to help me to see what was possible. And, I feel like I know that many of us physicians, especially women physicians, made the decision to be a doctor very young. And many times this is a decision that is lauded and applauded by our friends, families, neighbors, teachers. So when you put in so much work, you've gotten so much praise for this, and it's meaningful to you yourself, it can be hard to pivot and realize, hey, maybe as an adult, or maybe as a middle-aged woman or mid-career woman, maybe I have more information now to make a different decision, or to build on the decisions I've made up until now, and maybe take those skills and use them in a way that's more appropriate or more fitting, at this phase of life. And so I would think that a woman would have to have like a growth mindset, as they say, in order to be able to even consider an option like that.
Yeah.
And I know this is kind of another question I'm throwing at you, but what are some tips that you have for mindset shifts that, one or two that might be necessary for a woman considering a non-clinical career pivot or any sort of change?
I think you hit on one just now when you talked about a growth mindset. So I'll just reiterate it really, because I think it's probably the biggest one, right? We come into medicine, we work really hard to get there and to stay there. We develop a certain skill set. And then a lot of times we we just kind of stay there, right? And it's a good place, right? Like it's a good noble thing to be a physician, clearly, right? I guess school and training and even years into your attendingship is not the end of you. Like it's not the end of any of us. And there are so many ways that we can continue to change and grow if we choose to. It's not a default thing. It takes intention. But there's more inside of each of us, right? Where you're more than a doctor. That resonates for you, then know that that's true, and that it can be pulled out, right? And you can certainly make strides to grow into the next version of you. I think a lot of times we all thought for a while that like the path into medicine with all of its challenges, that becoming the doctor, right, was the end of the rainbow, right? It was like that was the goal. Now that you hit that goal, it can feel like if it feels like that was the end goal and then that's it, then it would make sense, right? That you would stay there, or you might think that you have to stay there. But there's a subset of people who know that, there's something more, there's a pull inside of you. There's something different that you want to do. Listen to that, right? I'm not talking to everybody, but there are people who are growth minded and feel like they're made for more. I want you to listen to that little voice, that little nudge, that bit of discomfort, even that burnout. It's really that pain of your current situation that really is your biggest gift sometimes and your biggest ally, because it's what forces you to change direction, right? It's what brings everybody that I coach into coaching. It's what brings anybody who's made a successful transition from where they are to where they want to be. There's some pain involved in that, but you have to listen to it and see it as the gift and the nudge that you need for a different direction that you'd like to take. So growth mindset. You grow. You're not done. That's enough to summarize, I think, the biggest mindset shift.
Yes, just like we have our continuing medical education, our CME, I guess we need to be engaged in some CSE, some continual self-education, like learning ourselves as we change and grow throughout life. And that's wonderful. And it's a little tough to have that mindset shift when you're in the throes of things. And many of the people around us at work are in the same boat. Many doctors are also burned out, a lot of nurses and other staff. And you get together and we talked about this when I first started coaching, you get together, you share your gripes and your concerns. But at the end of the day, sometimes you walk away feeling even heavier, and it makes it even more difficult. So I think that's where support and coaching and community comes into play, kind of stepping out of that frame and embracing what someone else may be able to help you see about yourself and your situation. Thank you so much. And I wanted to also ask you, for me personally, you've coached me all the way from the throes of burnout through my transition to the other side of the transition, where I'm now a very happy non-clinical physician. That was the right decision for me, which I didn't make until I was almost 2 years into my coaching. I first addressed my burnout. What tips do you have for women as they cross over into whatever they decide is the next phase for them? If they do decide to transition from maybe a busy clinical life to a different career that may have a different pace and be maybe busy in a different way, perhaps intellectually challenging, but maybe it's a desk job. What are some tips you have to help women deal with that adjustment after they make that transition?
I think the biggest one is recognizing that even good transitions are transitions, right? They require time and space and grace. So even if you are leaving clinical medicine, going into a non-clinical career, right? That's your goal. That's a good thing. Recognize that even that positive transition is going to take time, and there's like some discomfort and growth as you shift into another season. I think what I have, something that you shared with me is like, when you did make your own transition, you went from like a very chronically highly stressed, burned out state to this non-clinical career where the pace was much slower, much more balanced. And it felt kind of weird at first, right? It's like, aren't I supposed to be, running around with like fire coming out of my head, right? Like I have been doing for the past decade and plus. It takes time to kind of to cool off. So I think knowing that going in, right? Not painting anything in your life with like a magic fairy brush, but knowing that it's going to be different. It's going to be great. And I'm going to have to give myself grace and probably get some support too, just as I learn how to be a new version of myself, and exist in a different way is really helpful.
Absolutely. And I remember when we were discussing the impact that coaching had on my life during my transition, one thing you said was, everywhere we go, there we are. And so that's why it's so important that even though your setting may change, you're still there. So it's so important, I think, to get that support and practice that self-care, that continual self-education, where you're willing to grow, but you're realizing even the growth is a stressor many times. Yes. Well, do you have any parting tips for us, Dr. Jeannie, as we wrap up? And then also, can you tell us where we can find you?
Parting tips. Wow, I have so many this was a great conversation, first of all, Sandy, and thank you for doing this for your audience. The opportunity to share. I think this is the resources like this are what I wish I had, years ago. It just really helps to see what's possible. I think my biggest tip right now is just to remember who you are. This is me talking to any woman physician who's listening. There was a time, I bet, when you knew that you were bright and you were brilliant and you were talented and you were made for so much more, right? Like you would not have become a physician if you didn't know that about yourself, if there wasn't some sense that you were meant to shine bright in this world. What happens a lot of times is that as we go along life, whether, we get deep into our careers and find ourselves dissatisfied or burned out, or you don't even have to be burned out for this to apply, right? You can get into the throes of like just kind of mundane life as a woman, right? As a woman physician, as a wife, as a mom, as a caregiver, all these things. And I think sometimes we can lose sight of who we are, right? And we start to think that we're just a physician, just a mom, just a this, just a that. And we start to accept things that we wouldn't have accepted for ourselves before, right? The conditions that we work in, the devaluation that's happening all through medicine, the self-neglect that we often do in service to others, everything and everyone else. My tip, I guess, is remember who you are. And that's easier said than done, but you're amazing. And I'm saying that to any woman physician who's listening, because that's my heart and that's what I believe. Like, you're an incredible woman, and you deserve a life that lights you up, right? You deserve to thrive and not just survive day in and day out. You deserve to enjoy the one precious life that you have. And if you need some help making that happen, it's worth it, because this is not the dress rehearsal. This is our real life. So someday is not a real day. It's today, right? That if this resonates for you, that something needs to change. And it's okay to ask for help to do that. That's the other thing. We're really self-sufficient, right? We didn't have coaches to get us through med school, but this is a new phase of life, right? And if you're trying to make a big change and doing it on your own hasn't been working, the best thing that you can do for yourself, hands down, is to get the support that you need from whomever that is. So yeah,
absolutely.
You're with that.
Yes, and I think that's, definitely to all women physicians, whether you're pivoting or not, invest in yourself, invest in support, get together with other women physicians, get a physician coach, because I do remember one thing you said in the podcast that where I first heard you is that we women physicians, we like to talk to other doctors, because I feel like it is hard to take that cape, that white coat, AKA the cape, off around people who are not doctors, especially if they're not close family members. It's very hard because we are put on this pedestal. We're expected to be the healthcare heroes, whether we're on the front line or not. So it's very tough to be vulnerable with non-physicians. So that was one thing for me that was very special about finding a physician coach to coach me, someone who could identify with my struggle and someone with whom I didn't feel like I had to be the hero or be okay. I knew I didn't have to be okay when I came into coaching with you, Jeannie, and you were going to help me to be better, and you did. And please, for the women out there listening who have decided that it is time for them to put themselves first and invest in their own mental health and their career transition, how can they find you, Jeannie?
You can find me on my website, JeannieLawrenceMD.com/sanctuary, as well as on Instagram and LinkedIn, Dr.JeannieLawrenceMD. We started an incredible group just this week, Sanctuary for Women Physicians, and we're combining coaching with community to bring more women physicians together, right? Because as you mentioned many times, Sandy, in this interview, community is important, right? We get one another. There's like a shared experience that women physicians have, a shared language that we speak, and a collective wisdom that when we get together, right, can really make any transition, that you're trying to make that much easier, enjoyable, faster, right, than you would going alone. And so if you are a woman physician, right, who relates to this conversation, you don't have to be burned out, right? You can be burned out. You don't have to be burned out. But if you're looking to make a change in your life, right, and you need that support, you need an outside perspective to help you see the possibilities, join us. We'd love to have you.
Yes, this is exactly how I found Dr. Jeannie, and the rest is history. It's totally changed my life, and I want that for my other sister docs, my fellow women physicians. Well, Dr. Jeannie, thank you so much for joining us here on Beyond the Doctor's Lounge, and I look forward to having you back on the show one day. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Sandy.
Thank you.